Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about more improvements to the pack action, a new coffee machine mechanic which improves drive, and the beginnings of autonomous employees. Let's dive in. So a central objective in the game is to build, package, and sell products as you start your business. This week, I made the packaging step a little better. When you have this action selected now, a range around the player is displayed, and I've added enforcement, which doesn't allow you to try to package widgets that are outside of that range. I also made a little new art to create this foxy boxing animation when you hover over a widget that's eligible to be packaged. The typical cardboard box that you can ship and sell will open and close. I think this animation looks pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie. While I was in here, I also found and fixed a bug where you could use the carry action to pick up a package and place it anywhere visible, even outside of the usual range. I definitely want to limit the distance the player can be effective in the game. The player should feel like they are constantly needing to run around, trying to manage the logistics of moving things around and keeping everything flowing. I definitely can't leave any ways to get around that. This really doesn't have impact on the game itself, but I've cleaned up the repository a bit. The Office Sim had a couple false starts as a Unity game, and a place for me to explore WebGL. This game is open source, and it's my hope that it can be a resource for other developers as they learn and work to ship their own games. If you're a fellow game developer and you see a mechanic you like, always keep in mind that you can go to find out how I did it and use it yourself. Anyway, because of that, I want to keep the source relatively well organized and easy to understand. So I cleaned up having 3 projects in one place and revised the readme a bit to make it more obvious to newcomers how things work. Okay, and probably the most major thing I got working this week was this coffee vending machine mechanic. As the player works during the day and performs actions, they consume drive, which is represented with this progress bar up in the top left of the screen. Drive represents the main character's motivation and ambition to start and scale their business. If you allow drive to reach 0%, the player goes into a state of burnout, and the effect of their actions becomes dramatically diminished. Up until now, the only way to restore drive was to rest overnight by leaving your business for the day. This week, I've added a new action, which allows you to place a new type of furniture, which is a coffee vending machine. The coffee vending machine can be placed anywhere on your premises, and creates an area around it for taking a break. When you are within a certain distance of the coffee maker, you are in what I'm calling the coffee zone. And while you're in the coffee zone, you cannot perform normal actions like building widgets, packaging, carrying, etc. Instead, your character begins a friendly little animation where they sip coffee. Every 5-minute tick in the in-game clock, the player will receive 1 more drive point and they spend $5. So you have this option now, and you are kind of encouraged to go hang out in a break room type area when you need to be idle. My plan is to have a few tiers of coffee machines as you progress through the game. This one is just a vending machine, so it's kind of expensive and the coffee isn't that good. I'm imagining you might have other options like a big community pot of Folgers or a fancy espresso machine where the trade-offs of cost per drink and the boost to drive points are slightly different. I'm also imagining adding other items you would typically find in a break room that the player would want to co-locate there for a compounding effect. Think things like a snack bar, TV, comfortable seating, a bulletin board, or a ping pong table. The more you invest in these types of items, the bigger the benefit to drive when you have a player go to that area. When you're taking a break and you try to perform any actions, you are presented with a kind of ugly message across the screen. I'll probably make that look nicer in the future. I spent a good amount of time this week working on Y-sorting and rendering objects in a slightly different way. It's not really anything I advertised before, but I didn't really allow for any overlapping of the player or objects in the game. This is something that starts to feel kind of unnatural as you walk around and engage with the world, so I went ahead and tried to get this working in a way that you might expect. As this is a top-down game, I'm employing an approach typically referred to as Y-sort. This means I tie the drawing or rendering order of objects to their Y coordinate. In practice, this means objects that are higher on the screen are drawn first, and then objects lower are drawn on top of that. The end result mimics the perspective that a person expects, where objects which are further away are behind objects which are nearer. All of that to say that I'm working toward a much more natural feeling artistic perspective or projection, where the player's head doesn't seem to collide with table legs, for instance. Instead, the player can more freely walk in front of, between, or behind objects in the world. This is still a work in progress, and I'll hopefully have a much more full-featured update next week. I've started to jump into making Colm, our single employee for the time being, do more on his own. Up until now, he would just spawn in one specific place and build widgets next to himself. I've started exploring an approach to pathfinding to get him moving around the map wherever he might have objectives. As I experiment with this, I just try to make him follow the player around. We've done pathfinding before in previous games, but this is my first time doing it with Godot. There are some pretty great libraries built in, which have gotten me pretty far pretty fast. I've managed to get him to avoid static objects on the map, like walls, pretty effectively. I've tried using this avoidance feature to get him to move around some of the dynamic objects in the world, like tables or widgets, but it's not quite what I want. It's far too easy for him to get stuck along the way, so I'm going to keep working on this. My goal is to have him show up at the street at the start of his shift, walk to a spot where he builds widgets, carry those widgets over to the shipping area, and then ultimately walk back to the street at the end of his shift. So stay tuned for an update on this feature next week. Alright, I think that's it for this week. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and check out finalparsec.com for tools to bring your own game ideas to life. Also, if you're looking for game hosting, world building tools, or a spreadsheet maker, check out the link to our store below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.